reveals the essence of God. But what they should be emphasizing is the fact that the relationship between Jew and God is so deep that that's what brings out the essence of God.
1 second. We learned here, we're up to, let me just say we're up to page Reish Chavav. I'm sorry, Perik Reish Chavav, 266, page Taf Nun Zayin, Hamshech Ayin Beis, Sunday morning. What is it? Vav of? Zayin already, right? Yeah. Okay. And we learned that the Helam Atzmi, the essential Helam, concealment of godliness in Golus, comes from the Pnimis Chachmas Tima, the Helam Atzmi in Elokus. And through that, when you reveal that, you get the deepest level of love of God revealed. That's a general explanation of Golus and its darkness. And that's many places in Chassidus talks about this darkness. You can't deny the last 2,000 years have been Saras. You have a Holocaust, you have the pogroms, you have the Inquisition, you have the Gzeirus Tach V'Tat, you have the Crusades. Jews suffered tremendously. So there were different Jewish philosophers come to understand Jewish suffering. And Chassidus ultimately explains that suffering, though as bad as it is, it's a direct result of God's profound love for us. Not that He's punishing us, but the concealment is a result of our iniquity, so to speak. And because He cares so much, the concealment has very profound love. That's the general explanation for the Helm of Golus. It's not a contradiction that there are things that God did that kept us going. Look, the fact that Jews are still here. With all that, there were miracles that we survived. And we didn't always survive because of our efforts, because God made sure that Am Yisrael Chai, that a Jew will not disappear, no matter what happens. So, I don't see the contradiction. So sometimes Chassidus, sometimes you talk about the miracles of God, or the great gifts God gave us. That's one side of it. But here he's talking about the Helam itself. How do we deal with that darkness? How do we deal with the concealment, the Gvura, with the horrible Gvura of the Helam of Elokus? So you can just dismiss it, or you could say that in that Helam there's a very profound love, like we're talking here about Tisha B'Av, that Mashiach is born while the fires are highest in the Beis HaMikdash, that the Geula is born in the depths of the Golus. That's essentially what he's saying here in this. So it's not a contradiction that in other places there's other emphasis. This is what he's discussing here, and that's, I don't see. It's not less, one doesn't negate the other. Chassidus, the Rebbe brings in the Kutei Sichos and different places, he brings that the Gili of Chassidus, the end of days, is for two reasons. They contradict each other if you think about it, but they're really interdependent. One is because the Choshech HaGolus is so deep, so we need now a deeper koyach, like the story with the Keser Melech, to save us. And the second is because it's a taste of Mashiach's times. The end of days is a taste of Mashiach's times. So the question is, which one is it? Taste of Mashiach times, that's a great Gili. The other one's to save. The answer is before the dawn is darkest. So they both, the darker time itself causes us to reveal a deeper place, which will bring us to the highest Gili of Mashiach.
You said things are actually getting better on the world a few minutes ago. So,
absolutely.
So
Overall,
how's it also the darkest?
So you tell me.
Can't tell you. I don't understand the truth.
Okay, it's a good question. The answer is, the Rebbe himself answers it. There's a, did you ever hear of a book called Shuvas B'Urim? It's printed now in the Igros Kodesh. The Rebbe, before his Nesius, gave out a kavitz called Kavitz Lubavitch. For a while, it came out. It was like a periodical that would come out every while. In it was the most interesting part of it. It was had everything in there, all kinds of the news, simchas, It was, I don't want to have the call compared to COL,
I was
but
just thinking that.
no, because it was the Rebbe's publication, so it was on a higher level, no gossip. But the Rebbe had one mother there, one section called Shuvas B'Urim. People would ask him questions and he would answer them. We have like 15, 20 essays from the Rebbe, handwritten. The Rebbe himself answered on interesting questions. And one of them is on Tchias HaMesim, which is a long one. Today it's all printed in the Igros Kodesh in volume 1 and 2. You can find all these answers. They were answers to people, but he published it like a question and answer thing. And the one Tchis Mesim is unbelievable. If you want to understand Mashiach, really, you got to read this introduction from the Rebbe there. So the Rebbe explains Mashiach in a very, a logical way, the structure. Basically says the following, this is a quote. He says that existence, created for a purpose, generally evolves from primitive to more refined. And history is a sequence, a flow, of a world becoming more refined, more mezuchach. And even though the Rebbe says there are bumps, and sometimes there are some setbacks, but overall, the generations become more pure and more refined. Because the more mitzvahs you do, the more refined the world becomes. And then the Rebbe writes, it's not a contradiction to what we say, Yeridus Haderis, that our generation is a lower generation than the previous, because individually we don't have the same neshamas, let's say, this had in the time when they left Egypt. But collectively, remember, we're like midgets that stand on the shoulder of giants. Collectively, accumulatively, we have what they had plus the little that we do. So if you measure the door of Moshe Rabbeinu, our door is a weaker door per se. But the world is a much more refined world than it was in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what generally the Rebbe says. And therefore, the end of the process will be, as he says, the end of the battle between good and evil. And that will lead to the next stage, where there will be clearly that there's good and there's evil in the world. You know, Yizbaru v'Yislavna Advarim, clarity. And then there'll come the final third stage. He says, Elam Haza is the battle between good and evil. That's the story of history. I'm not adding much. This is the Rebbe's way of structuring it. That there's three stages in history. One is the battle between good and evil. Then comes the end of that stage, in Yemoisa Mashiach, where there's still good and evil, but the battle is no longer for a fierce battle. You know this is good, this is evil, but there's still good and evil in the world. And then there's stage 3, where the Eibishter will shech the Yetzer Hara, and Ruach HaTumah Avrim Min Haaretz, that comes only from above. Where God will get rid of all the Tumah. And our job, obviously, is to do whatever we can. So the Rebbe makes it very clear that there's a stage, which I believe is what the Rebbe is saying where we are today. There's still evil in the world. There's no question about it. You see people murdering each other. I mean, you don't need more than that. But the question is whether it's a force of evil and battle of good and evil, or it's just evil, the evil that still remains over the years that we have to now identify. So even when you see things really bad emerging, the Rebbe always would say emerging bad is always better than concealed bad, because it means at least it's getting noticed. And so no one's saying the world. That's why we don't have a Geula, because we still have bad in the world.
Everything's being revealed nowadays.
Right. So the Rebbe's, you got to read this. It's beautiful, beautiful. The Rebbe's explanation. It's like it just gives you a real picture of like how to see the world. It's not just like Mashiach is going to come. You also see another thing that I think a lot of people make a mistake. Mashiach, from a Yiddishkeit point of view, is not an event. It's a process that concludes with an event. Maybe people think of some event, something's going to happen, and everything is that Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Maseinu v'Avodeseinu. Our avodah brings Mashiach. What does it mean? Every time you do a mitzvah, you reveal a little of Gili Elikus. Mashiach is Gili Elikus in this world. Mashiach, the Gavra, the person of Mashiach, is just is like Moshe leading Jews out of Mitzrayim, but it's not about him. I mean, I'm not minimizing the role of Mashiach, but I'm saying he leads the world to a world of Gilui Elikus. But the bottom line is a Gilui Elikus, and then Mashiach comes. Hashem sends the leader when the bidder is ready. That type of thing.
Just other major Gilui Elikus, just this little unwinding.
Well, you know something from the Rebbe. The advent of technology, according to the Zohar, the political situation that we live in a world of freedom. And many, many other things are definitely Giluim of Mashiach. The Achdus. I mean, technology essentially is seeing Achdus in the world. Communication. You can connect to anyone, anywhere. The Rebbe has a Siach in Noach. He talks about television and radio in that way. Internet would be even more so. It shows that there's an integrity. Science in general is recognizing unity among fragmented phenomena. That's really what it is. Anyway, so let's go back here. We're on page Reish Chav Vav. To sum up, I'll tell you the truth. I was saying, I went back this morning, much earlier, and yesterday I was reading back where the beginning of this whole thing began, to tie it up together. And when we learned it then, you could only understand it now, really, because he's feeling. But all this whole thing with the Helem and all that, if you recall then, the whole thing was, he's explaining the pasuk that he began to explain in the Maimer, I think it's Not Rosh Hashanah Maimer. Kiseitse Maimer here. On page Shinayin Hay, as he begins explaining the first of the 5 levels of Torah, Uman. Remember, the Torah has 5 levels, and that Uman is connected to Mufla, Pella. So he begins to explain Havai lekei ata erememcha oider shimcha ki asisa Pella etzes meracha kamuna Uman. So, if you recall, what he said was that the levels Hashem lekei ata is Chachma Bina Das, the whole Seder Shtalshlus, that you lift up the 10 spheres to Keser. And he says this is the introduction to the destruction that comes in the next nevuah of the Klippa. That was what he began discussing this whole subject matter. And then he went into whole arichas with Aleph and Pella. I'm just giving the sum up here. That Chochmah has 2 parts to it. Chochmah is Aleph. The Aleph is how Chochmah comes down and teaches. Aleph and Lashon Melamed. Chochmah into Bina and to the Spheres. But then he went to the other side of Chochmah, which is Chochmah as it goes back to Pella, to Keser, and where's Mailan to Keser, and it becomes a Chochmah Stima, and Primis Chochmah Stima, which is one with Atik. And remember, Chochmah has both sides. It comes down and it goes up. Hafla, Pella, and Yerida. I'm just tying it all together. So, I'm tying. This is what he's saying here. So all this arichus is really coming down. What is the mamutza? Chachma becomes the mamutza because Chachma is both Aleph and Pella. Keser itself, we don't really see it in an obvious way. But more specifically, it's Chachma Stima. But remember, he kept on comparing Chachma Stima to Chachma Gluya. They all have 2 features. Chachma, bottom line, however you twist it, either the unconscious Chachma or the conscious Chachma, is made up of two opposites.
2 directions.
One is able to go to places that are beyond, and it's able to teach lower levels. In other words, if we didn't have wisdom, if we didn't have the capacity of Chachma, we would only be in one place. You could not travel back and forth from, let's call it, talk about Elikus and explain it to someone, because you don't have the ability. Midas don't have that ability. Midas are feelings. You feel happy, you feel sad, you feel loving, you feel gevura, whatever. But Chachma has that ability to go to places and travel to places that are so-called beyond us, abstract. We can imagine, we can dream, we can learn about something, and then you can come back and tell about it. So Chachma is like this traveling agent that serves as the mamutza ultimately. But really the mamutza is happening on the unconscious level. That's where he gets to the heart of it, on the Chachma Stima, the Primis and the Chutzenius. But its features are very similar to the Primis and Chutzenius of Chachma, which is really Aleph Pella, which is back to this pasuk. And all this, when you go deeper up there, you're able to bring down a Chadash that can break the Klippa down below. And I was, as I said last time when we were here, I was constantly being, I realized, what's he talking about Klippa here? He's talking about a process of consciousness and unconsciousness, spheres. But clearly the whole picture is necessary because that's why he went to this whole thing with Golus. And he keeps going back because it also explains the whole idea of Helam in general, even the negative Helam. So the Helam Ha'atzmi, the way it is in Chachma Stima, is not a negative thing. It's fundamentally concealed because it's like intimate. Like we said, there's some things that just are not expressible, period. But that's the root of the Helam of Golus. So the depth of the love of the Eibishter to us, that's expressed when you don't see him, is a reflection of that Helam Ha'atzmi. And when we fight against it by not taking, so to speak, by not weakening as a result of Golus and all its challenges, as he said, and not only that, not weakening, but also transforming it, we in a sense force the issue and we reveal the Helam Ha'atzmi. And that's when Pella becomes Aleph. So it goes both ways. So Pella, to reach the deepest level of Pella, to get it into Aleph, the Helam of Golus, or Tshuva, is able to extract or draw down that deeper level. That's essentially, I would sum up, is literally from Shin Ayin Hey till where we are now. And he's tying it together this way. Now, of course, there's a lot of details that make it complicated. But, so let's continue. How was that? Okay. So we just summed up. Should we read the Kitzur or we read it already?
Really, but it doesn't hurt to go over it.
Okay, so let's just read the Kitzur and Tofnun. We read it last time. This is the whole class last time was on the Kitzur. The dogma of what? The dogma of the deeper love of the father to the son. And remember that there was two types of ways that father transmits love. One is when a father wants to give the child something, so he gives it. Let's say he teaches him something. So also he has to conceal it somewhat, because just to transmit to a lower level. But that's a lavush, like he said. But then there's the depth that is not really gvura, and it's also not the depth of ava atzmis. It's regular love. But then the depth of ava atzmis is when the child does something wrong, falls, gets dirty, as we said, golus. And then the concealment is so deep, if the father didn't care, he wouldn't do anything. Because he withdraws, and as he said before, he rebukes, he's distressed, whatever words we use for it. That distress is, on one hand, pure gvura, because mamish concealment. It's not just a moshel explaining to a child, spoon feeding. It's true gvura, but within it lies absolute ava atzmis, because there wouldn't be any concealment if the father didn't care. And that revelation of that revealing of care is much deeper, because it's coming from the depths of the etzem that would only be revealed when there is something wrong. In other words, the bottom line is like this. If you put it in simple issues, Moshe Rabbeinu now is on Har Sinai, begging God for forgiveness for Chet HaEgel. Right? We know that it's hard times. I mean, these days. He's the second time on the mountain right now. Now, the first 40 days he received the Torah, and he broke the luchas after they built Chet HaEgel. He goes up again, marches until Rosh Chodesh El. Moshe is on the Har. It says these middle days are Yomim Yimei Regis. What's the word? Yimei Kas. In other words, that corresponds with the 9 days. That Moshe is not getting what he wants. He wants forgiveness. But then finally, he comes Rosh Chodesh El. He comes back down, goes back up a third time. Yom Kippur, he returns with Luchas Shnias. And Yom Kippur becomes the holiest day in the year for one reason. Because the love of the Eibishter that comes after there's a break and after there's a betrayal is far deeper than the love that was by Matan Torah. Because by Matan Torah, the Eibishter gave the Torah to the Eden. He expected the most from them, and that was it. But then they messed up. They betrayed the Eibishter.
Oh yeah, Shavuos we're not allowed to fast, and on Yom Kippur we're not allowed to eat. Okay,
well, you know something? It says Shavuos, the luchas were given with fanfare, a lot of noise. And Yom Kippur, because of that, you do everything quietly. That's precisely the reason, just so that you need more humility. So Shavuos is a gili of Ava, great gili of Ava. But it's an Ava Mamayla Lamata. The Jews obviously messed it up, they built the Egel. And then when Moshe gets forgiveness, Salachta Kidvarecha, we know it's much deeper, the love that comes after the betrayal, because if God could still love them after what they did, you have to say it's a very profound love. The key thing is to know that Moshe, how did Moshe know? God kept saying, no, I'm not going to forgive them. It took 80 days. It took 80 days. It took him only 40 days to get the Torah, 80 days to get forgiveness. So clearly, it was not a simple matter. But what happens? He reveals the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the 13 attributes, and Hashem reveals His face. You know, the whole exchange there in Parshat Kisisa. The back. But it says also the face indirectly. Yeah, it says that too. Huh? Lo Yiro. In a way of Lo Yiro. The Rebbe brings that. You ever hear the Rebbe's teaching this from Ponim Yofis? Made a teach. Moshe asked the Eibishter, what's the lesson there? Hareini nos chvedecha. Show me your glory, meaning show me your face. The Eibishter says, Lo yireini adam v'chai, no person can see me and live. And the Eibishter says, V'isay sacherai, uponai lo yiro. So the Rebbe brings a question, why does he have to rub it in? He says, he already said, Lo yireini adam v'chai. Say V'isay sacherai, what do you have to add, ponai lo yiro? Like, you know, saying, and I have to tell you, my face you will not see. And what's also the Havamin of Moshe? Moshe was a wise man. What do you think? He could see God's face. You know, and the Rambam says face and Ponim and Ochra obviously means God's Pnimius, God's Chetzenius, doesn't mean. So the Rebbe brings from Ponim Yafis, unbelievable answer. That the way you're supposed to read the Pasuk is V're'isa es ha'cherei u'ponai, and then Kama, but Ponai you'll see through Lo Yiro, through not looking. That the Eibishter was actually allowing him and telling him, my back you can see directly. My face you have to see, but by not looking. Right, by not looking. And then you'll see it. And that's why Moshe asked, and Moshe got his request answered. And also explains why the Torah tells us. The Torah has to tell us every time God denies Moshe Rabbeinu. Clearly.
So when he went down
isn't that unbelievable beer?
Down, that's when he saw it. He went down.
Yeah, exactly. Like in other words, because it says Ili Yadaita v'Yisuf. If you knew me, you would be me. If you want to see God face to face, you have to not be you. If you're there, then you can't see it. You have to in some way. And the Achirei of the Chechenis, the Rebbe explains it.
Wow.
It's made a big explanation. It's unbelievable. It basically is that there is ultimately, you could even have a connection with Atzmos, but it has to be. The truth is, you need both. You need the Reisus Achirei for the Mamutza part. You need it because we have to also be there. But the Panai is through the negating of it. It's like both together. So a part of you relates to God, a part of you doesn't relate. By not relating, by knowing that, by not looking, you obtain it. It says there are things that come through Shikha. There are things that come not through direct Shikha. The mitzvah of Shikha. The Alter Rebbe in the Likutei Torah says that when things you leave in the field and you forget, you're supposed to leave them for the poor. So the Alter Rebbe brings that's from the mitzvahs that you're mamshich something that you can't directly be mamshich. You can only be mamshich by through not being there. Like he says, people who pursue kavod, the kavod eludes them. The people who run away from kavod comes to them. It's the same reason. There's certain things you cannot get by trying to get it. You can only get it by going the other way. Wow. And the Rebbe once said in the Farbrengen, and I remember, that doesn't mean that running away from kavod and looking over your shoulder whether it's chasing you. It really means, like Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want it. The Eibishter wanted someone who doesn't want the job, basically. He doesn't want someone who wants the job. So, okay. We're reading the Kitzur. That the Hester Agolis comes because of the profound Ava, essential Ava for Eves Yaakov, that Hashem loves Yaakov Eden. The root of it is a Meches Timah, which is Tev HaSosim Be'etzem. It's goodness, but it's completely Be'etzem concealed. Mezeh HaCheshech Atzmi de Golos. From there is the root of the Cheshech of Atzmi of Golos. V'ayadhaveda B'Teira Mitzvahs B'Zman HaGolos, and through our Aveda, Teira Mitzvahs, that we make an effort. V'Ika B'Shapche de Cheshech, and especially in the transformation of darkness. B'Tshuva de Nefesh HaBamis, the Libi Psari Yiranenu, my heart and my flesh celebrate or sing or dance. Not dance. Yiranenu, celebrate, sing. Jubilate, okay. Shaydezeh Pella Nasa Aleph. Through this, we're mamshich from Pella into Aleph. Pella, which is the Ulfan Chadas Limud Muhus Alakus.
This is not shaykh to
a new limud.
Normal people.
Muhus Alakus is not shaykh to normal people.
Well, her. I mean,
Well, who's exactly normal? You consider yourself normal? I don't.
I'm working on it. But then, right, it seems it's shaykh to tzaddikim to be transformed.
Everything is bedat. It's all levels. It's all measure. We are all shaykh in some ways to all these levels. Depends on what extent.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, but the idea of that we come through, let's say, a difficult situation or doing tshuva on something, repairing and healing something that was negative in our lives. We could find examples, even in Noshim Kerkenu. U'kumay golos mitzrayim agdom l'matan teira delay mati hu atzimtzum silika er legamri she'enu nirgish afilu b'kayach. You don't feel it even potentially. By dezemoti, and through this, there's the drawing down to gili er atzmi the teira by matan teira. By tzimtzum ikar kavan li is gili primis hakav. The tzimtzum main primary role of the tzimtzum is primis hakav. V'chein b'golos achron, the same thing in our final golos. There is gili eidin ilah stimol la'asid. The gili of Eidin Ilah, the higher supernal Eidin, which is pleasure, Stima, the concealed, the loss of love, Mashiach comes. So let's continue. Reish Chavav. V'zeh Masha Kosa B'Zeir Pasha Bolok. This is back to Zeir from what I was referring to earlier, back from the beginning. This is like connecting it. The Zeir and the Pasuk Kasisa Pela Kisuya V'Levusha. Dover acher ki asisa pella ki asisa aleph. So the Zohar says asisa pella. It says in the pasuk should be read ki asisa aleph. Pella is the asis aleph backwards. V'hainu shapella yir b'bchinas aleph. V'gilui shapella ba'atzme yizgala. So the fact that the same word has both letters, it's not two levels. It's the same level. One is the way it's in concealed state, and one is how it comes revealed. So the part that the Zohar is saying is that the Pella, which was concealed in Keser, Mechus Temon, Sasam Be'etzim, that Pella itself is Izgala in Aleph, which Aleph means to teach, to reveal, to transmit. V'zeu aydei hesta shenasam ha'kisi v'ha'Pella hazeh. And this Gilui came through the concealment of the cover-up and the Pella, through this Pella. V'aydei yi Gilui b'chinas Pella atzmi. So the hesta shenasam ha'kisi v'ha'Pella, yeah.
And all is achieved through the Hester.
Yeah. Because we said through the Hester of Golus as the only way you can reveal this level.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if there was no Helam of Golus that we fought against and we when Mesa Nefesh, you'd never get this Gili. You need to have a Helam here to get to this Gili.
That's what I was asking about. Yeah, it's not, it doesn't seem to be the only way.
Well, look, Golus is the way. There's no. I don't see any other way. How else was it done? We've been in Golus all these years.
We're still in Golus, but the world has changed, so it seems to be two ways.
What's the other way?
Yeah, Sad Yachar, a father to a child.
But that's also the Golus. The child's sick is Golus.
Sure, but the Yachar, well, okay.
V'yia gili b'yesa seisa b'yesa days. And then the Asud Lavi, meaning there will be the Gili, the revelation will be with far more intensity, maybe Matan Teda, as it was by Matan Teda, because remember we learned before that Matan Teda came after Golus Mitzrayim. So the Asud Lavi will also come after our Golus, but the Asud Lavi, the Gili will be far greater.
But it seems like every Golus when it ends still has a little bit left of it. We're still in the Golus of Gan Eden, leaving Gan Eden, and then.
But it said, but Asud Lavi will be over. Then it will be Geula She'enachar Golus. Yeah, that's the final remnants. That's why we're so long and so much harder. Golus Mitzrayim is only 210 years, huh?
It says Ki Ayin Ba'ayin
Yiru. Then Asud Lavi Ba'ayin Yiru means we will see eye to eye.
Do we have any remnants of Golus Mitzrayim?
This Golus is an extension of Golus Mitzrayim in some way. Kimetz Heischem Eretz Mitzrayim. So we have, but Mitzrayim v'Gvulim, not Egypt, but
our own limited thinking. So before that, all the Jews had profound thinking, and then that's so cool. That's such a good answer.
We'll have Riyas Samachus Mamish. Let's just explain that for a moment. Riyas Samachus Mamish, it means that you see the essence of things. You don't see the Chitzenius. He's going to go into Yediyas HaMetzias and Midhus. There's the Metzias and Mahus. I think in Tov Aleph he says a very beautiful explanation. Metzias is the shape and form of something, and Mahus is Mahu. What is it? So if you tell a child this is a table, that's Metzias. If you tell a child a table is used to learn on, to eat on, something else, that's the Mahus of the table. So everything in this world has the so-called outer shape and form, and then the Mahus is Mahu, like from the word Mahu. What is it? What is it? What is its deeper purpose? Why do we cut down a tree from the wood from a tree and chop it into a table or into a chair? So everything has a Mahus. So the same thing is with the Welt. You know Metzias of something, you just know it's external. You know it's there. But you don't necessarily see its inner purpose. So the Alakus, the same things with Alakus. You can know that God is there. You can logically say that the world nothing creates itself. There must be a force. But it doesn't mean you have an idea in the Mohus or Riyah. Doesn't mean you see the Mohus of Alakus. You just recognize that there's a Metzias. There must be something that put it there. would be similar. Like, this building, beautiful building, was built by an architect. You have no idea what kind of architect it is. What's his personality like? If you met him, would you recognize him? You only see his product. That's Mitzias. So Riyas and Mahus La'asalav will be Ayin Ba'ayin Yiro. The B'matan Teira Hayirak Shemenes Hanira. By Matan Teira it says they only heard the sounds. Shebechinas Mahusa Ein Sof Haya Etzlon Bechinas Shmiya Levad. The Mahusa of Ein Sof was only in a form of hearing the story.
So that's what they heard, what they saw, and saw what they heard.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I just thought of that too. So he's really interpreting it like the opposite. Usually we see it as an advantage. It says Harena Sakhe.
Probably don't explain it, I'm sure.
Huh?
That's really must explain it. That's such an obvious.
No. But he's going a step further. Look, he definitely saw things. But then there's the Mamre Chazal says Shemenes Hanira. They heard what that was seen. We usually see that as a strength.
Right.
They didn't just see it; they also heard it with the power of hearing. So he's interpreting here. There's also a downside to it. They only heard it. They didn't really. In other words, they couldn't really absorb it. Like they had to just say how we interpret. Obviously, in other places, it's interpreted like synesthesia. That all the shchushim were all so sensitized that you heard what you saw, and you saw what you heard, and all things. He's just interpreting it this way. I mean, we have to look it up in other places. I'm sure there's other Maimorim that talk about it. But let's put it this way. There's a level of Shmiya that was by Matan Torah, that's for sure.
So the idea is to see what we see.
Right. But to really see what we see.
Yeah, right.
All the Yemesa Mashiach, Yeh B'chinas Riyah Mamash.
Huh.
Yemesa Mashiach will be Mamash Riyah. What's the lashon in the pasuk? What's the lashon? Rein as akelis? Huh? Do you remember?
What in
The pasuk in Yisrael. Before it says the Mamre Chazal says Rein as anishma. What does it say? Rein as akelis? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Rein as akelis?
this is the name or
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Look. Okay. Bottom line is Matan Torah Shmiya. This is it. Fine. V'kol zeh u'ayde aveda achshav b'halamas v'asterim. And this revelation, all this revelation, is through the aveda now, in the time, within the halamas, the concealments and the hiddenness. V'inyan hu dihina yudua diyiridus neshama lamata. The inyan in this is, it's yudua, it's known that the yiridah, the neshama, comes down lamata rak levarer esaguf v'nefesh habamas. Only to be mevared, to refine the body and the animal soul. The Hariyah Neshama Atzma Liyesim B'chinas Atzmis Alakus. Neshama itself doesn't need that, because the Neshama itself is Atzmis Alakus. It's Alakus itself. Ukidua Hefresh. She's going to explain now why Neshama is Alakus. What does that mean? Kidua Hefresh being called HaNivroyim. Like it's known the difference between all the creatures. Gam malachim elyenim, even the higher supernal angels, the neshamas. The difference between all creatures, even the highest angels, to neshamas. What's the difference? The cholan evrayim sheirish avusum b'chinas chitzenis hakelim. The chitzenis ha'er. All the nevrayim, their hisavus, their creation comes from the level of the outer containers, and the outer air. Sheb'chinas mokel le'elamish. The outer air, that's only a source to the elamus. That which in essence is it's only a reflection. V'sheidish haneshamas, however, the root of the neshamas is b'chinas pnimis hakelim, v'atzmis ha'er shelamaylam b'chinas makir. Neshamas, however, they're rooted in the pnimis of kelim, and the atzmis of air, that's higher than being a source to the worlds.
So it's not us.
So, for example, when you build a home for yourself, for your family, right? So the home has all kinds of rooms. You have a kitchen, a dining room, living room. You have objects in the rooms. You have bookcases, you have cupboards and stuff like that. All that is chitzenis. Why is it chitzenis? Because you didn't build a house for bookcases. You didn't build a house for cupboards. That's necessary to set the stage and set the table for what? For your children to come into the house. For your family to have a place to live. So then the family is coming from your Pnimius HaKavana. In this case, Neshamas Yisrael is the family. The Eibishter wanted a world that Neshamas can come and do their Aveda. But in order to do so, you need a world. You need rooms, you need furniture, you need furnishings and stuff like that. So the Chetzenis Haratzin, even it doesn't use the word Ratzin here, but in other places, Chetzenis, in other words, is coming from the Chetzenis. It needs to be done, but it's not coming from the Pnimius. Neshamas, on the other hand, is the purpose itself. This is what we say, Bereshis B'Shvil Yisrael, B'Shvil HaTorah, that the whole world was created. Everything is a means to the Neshamas.
What do you mean by Pnimius HaKelim and Neshamas come from Pnimius and
Pnimius Ha'er and Atzmis Ha'er.
You also said Pnimius
HaKelim, yeah, because Neshama, Sof Kol Sof, also is not just a Neshama, it's not just light, the Neshama has a shape and form. In Samachvavi explains it more in depth at the end. That ultimately, because in the Neshama itself, everything he doesn't really go into it. He's just saying it's Pnimius, but basically the technical terms is Pnimius HaKelim, Pnimius Ha'er. By the way, there's another Ayin Beis over there if you want. And if you want.
So what does that mean? Chelek Elokam Mamash? Is Asmud? Is part of Asmud?
Here he's not using the word Chelek Elokam Mamash.
Interestingly, I'm trying to understand because there it says Chelek Elokam, so here it's saying Pnimiut Ha'or. So it's not really.
The Chelek Elokam is on a higher level, probably. Remember, Chelek Elokam Mamash, you don't even compare it to Nevroim. It's a completely different thing. Here he's explaining, I guess, how Neshamas are in Seder Shtalshlus compared to the Nevroim in Seder Shtalshlus. Chelek Elokam Mamash, you don't say that Neshamas Chelek Elokam Mamash and everything else is not. You don't even mention it.
I have a chelek of something that as soon as you touch it, it's everything.
This is the whole thing. Atzim Shetef is Bechalpi. The Frierdiker Rebbe has letters of what chelek means. It means that even in the world where there is chalokim, you still have that. That's really ultimately what it means. Yeah. It's like generally speaking, tachteinu. When you say, I think they went swimming. I hear the pool music.
We had two people jump in the water. Huh?
Okay. Should we shut it or what?
No.
Oh, okay, I'll leave it on. Fine, I'll make it low.
There's two things to do. Either if somebody else.
Fine, leave it. That's all right.
Use your second line to call in.
It's all right. I just lowered it. So I assume, because here he's making the comparison. Look, in other words, to say the Shtalshlus, as things come into Atzilus, so Chetzenius HaKelim, Chetzenius Ha'er is going to be the Sherish of Nevroim. And Atzilus, Pnimius HaKelim, and Pnimius Ha'er is the Sherish of Neshamas. If you go all the way to Atzmos, then you say Yisrael, Kutsh B'richu Kul Echad. He's not talking, here is definitely talking how it's in the same Nishtalshos, for sure. Because that's the comparison. Anyway, so Neshamas come from Pnimius, fine. Okay, so here we go. While Cain, Yesh Hefresh Be'etzim Isavusam. And that's why, because their root is different, so the way they're shaped, the way they're created, the way they're, I guess, Savusan, the way they're formed, the way they're conceived, is also different. Be'etzem. The neshamas in b'chinas alakus mamish. Neshamas are mamish alakus. K'mosh b'mokam acher. What does that mean? Ulchein haneshama k'moshi l'mayla hasagasa hi b'chinas hasagas amahus mamish. And that's why in neshama, the way it's above in the Maila, the hasaga of a neshama and elikus is hasaga samuchus mamish. It gets elikus, the real thing. Lo yirak hasaga sametzias levad. It doesn't just get that it exists; it gets it. I guess that's maybe the best way to put it. Like it gets it. You can have two people in a conversation, three people. Two people get it, and the other person hears the words, but he doesn't really get it.
So when they say the neshama is from Atzilus and neshama this, but the all neshama is one way above.
In root, it all goes into Atzmos, obviously. But the difference between neshama and Atzilus, when we say Moshe or Rebbe, it means that from Atzilus to Asiya went express train. There's no levushim. You have it in Asiya as it is in Atzilus. We go through we have plenty of garments. That goes more and more and more. The Rebbe would say very often that by Moshe, when he's standing speaking to Pari, it was Atzilus speaking to Pari. As he was in Atzilus, that's how we were speaking. So that's a very, that you don't have usually. Usually you come down a few levels. They say there was the Alter Rebbe, for example, in Rabbi Hillel Parasha. The Alter Rebbe would fall asleep right before Shabbos for a few minutes. And Hillel Parasha would go to sleep. Because the Alter Rebbe was Bedug Mishalamayla, so he didn't have to make any effort. That time is Dermita Dezah, whatever, some type of sleep state before Shabbos enters, so he would just automatically. Rabbi Hillel knew what it says in the Svarim, so he went. And the rest of us, neither, we eat chant and then we fall asleep. Not because we want to, just because. I remember the Rabbi Fabringen, the beginning of Fabringen, he would make Kiddush, take a little mezainis, and that was it. He didn't really touch the mezainis at all. Then at the end of the Fabringen, suddenly the Rebbe started putting mezainis in his mouth. So I brought the Fabringen, didn't know. He says, he suddenly got hungry. Yeah, I said, if he was hungry, I said, no, he has to make a bracha achreina, and you have to have a shir.
Yeah, but he might have to make a new Raymond named McDonald's to go away.
Okay.
He probably made it slightly.
Fine. But the point is that most of us, we make a bracha in order to eat. And the Rebbe was eating in order to make a bracha. That's how I saw it. That's, halachically. There was there's a letter from the Rebbe in the Idus Kedesh, a man called Moshe Neimark. The Rebbe wrote to him something from his Rishimus. It's a beautiful piece. At the end there it says that the Rebbe Rashab is going to the mikveh. So the Chassid, the Neimark, says to the Chassidim, you think he needs the water? No, the water needs him. Yeah. Anyway, fine. So this is Neshama. So it's Mehus Alakus. Mehus, not just Metzias. U'kamoy Shabbat Tzilis, Shamus Mehus Alakus Kaneda. A Neshama, like as an example, Atzilus. In Atzilus, there's a perception of Mehus of Alakus, as it's known. Why? Because Atzilus is divine. The Benivroim, efshali is Gilei Mehus. Shaloyi oz b'metzias Nivroim. By creatures, they cannot have Gilei Mehus. They can't have a revealed Mehus, see it the way it is, naked, in its pure form. Because then they wouldn't be Metzias Nivroim. Av Atzilus liyesh Alakus, musik sham Mehus Alakus. But Atzilus, because its personality is divine, it's Alakus, therefore it perceives Alakus, the Mehus of Alakus. And the same thing is Komekein HaNeshama liyesh Alakus, Hasagasi b'chinas Hasagas HaMehus, Dain Riyas HaMehus. And because of the same thing with the Neshama, because it's Alakus, it's Hasagasa, it's perception and understanding is also Hasagas HaMehus, which means Riyas HaMehus. So he's saying perceiving and understanding Mehus is like seeing it, because seeing is you see the thing itself, not just you hear about it from another person. Like someone can tell you, there's a beautiful image there, or there's a beautiful sight, so you can appreciate it, but secondhand. You see it directly, you're seeing the beauty itself. And that's why Mekayim of the Neshama is in Gan Eden. That's where Neshamas hang out. The Sham hu b'chinas Mehus Elikus. The Zeh hefesh ben Gan Eden le'elamis. This is the difference between Gan Eden and the worlds. Just like Gan Eden, when Adam and Chava were in Gan Eden, there's a difference between Gan Eden and the rest of the world.
But Gan Eden is only zero.
But here he's talking about Gan Eden L'mayla. He's talking about the Neshamas of Gan Eden. Or Gan Eden. Yeah, but not Gan Eden on earth. It's just the level of Gan Eden.
Gan Eden is only zero.
Usually it's zero.
But here he's comparing relative to the Elamis. Obviously Gan Eden.
So when somebody kicks off and they go to Gan Eden, which Gan Eden do they go to?
Tachten and then Elyon. There's levels. And each one there's many levels. There's a lot of levels going on there. Don't go nowhere so fast. We need you here. Okay? And anyway, they say that you go to heaven for the climate and hell for the company. So you want the excitement. The fun ones are in another place. The one when we were fixing this house. So the contractors. So the contractor told me a story. He said that in heaven and hell they came together. They said, what? Why do we need to have two different worlds? He said, let's build a bridge, and we can visit each other. When you're bored, you can come from hell to heaven or heaven to hell, and that's it. Okay, you build half the bridge, we'll build the other half. Fine. They start building. The hell people have already built their half. The other half didn't even begin. They say, what's going on? They said, all the contractors are in hell. There's no one in heaven to build.
From suffering.
I use somebody else. The contractor told me this story. I said, why don't you tell me before I hired you? He built the half, and then he's contractors. Well, look, we have to build a dir b'tachteinu, and so we've got ours. We're also contractors that have some work to do. Okay, so the Zeu have been Gan Eden le'elamis. The elamis hem is Zayin Tachtenis. The worlds in general come from Zayin Tachtenis, which means Chesed through Malchus, the lower levels, Midas. Sheboim b'bchinis is Slapshus. There, Alakus is Bislapshus, which means concealed to some extent. Began Eden Meir Gimel Rishenis Shugili Amahusu Kamashikosu b'Malkamacha. You have to remember that Rabbi Rashab and Ayin Beis is very, very thorough. So he's going through all the levels. Obviously, you learn other places. Gan Eden is only a Gili, Ha'ara, but all relative, Gan Eden to the elements. So he's just really covering. That's what I see when I see that he starts bringing all these levels, and it's clearly that he's really just showing us the breadth of Chassidus, where it's everywhere manifested. From Allah Zayt in the same. V'yorda lamata, and then the neshama comes down lamata. Remember, he's going back. We said the neshama doesn't come down lamata for itself. It comes down lamata b'chdei lahareis gam laguf v'nefesh kan is birchin is gili in sof. Wow, that's a beautiful. I never saw it expressed that way. The neshama comes down in order to show the guf v'nefesh habamis, the gili of Ein Sof. It's a nice way to put it, no? So neshama on its own is having a good time up there, but it has to show now the guf v'nefesh habamis Ein Sof. What do you think about that, doctor? And the neshama is working, trying to show us Elokus.
That the question is that
are we cooperating? Are we Are we cooperating? Are we interested?
Exactly.
What do you think?
But the nefesh of Bechamis actually comes from a higher place than the.
In the root.
I didn't see anything higher than when you said the neshama comes from the nefesh. The animal cell is supposed to come from.
Let's put it this way: where we are right now, like one chassid once said, my nefesh habamis may be rooted somewhere, but it's pretty low right now. I don't know about where it's rooted. Of course it's rooted, but bottom line is, the nefesh habamis is not very much interested in Elokus too much. I don't know about yours. My nefesh habamis actually likes to learn chassidus, but that doesn't mean necessarily likes Elokus. How's yours doing?
Probably similar.
That's good. That's very high level.
No, that's already a good beginning.
Wants to learn Hasidus. That's.
I had a great grandfather. My father was named after him. His name was Gershon Ber Paharer. He was a chassid, the Samach Tzaddik. He was a pretty big chassid. And the Rebbe don't tell the story. There's an Avos Chassidus. The Rebbe writes about him a lot because he was, that. So Gershon Ber Paharer was a real, chassid shid, and so he was saying Sfiras HaEmer, Hayom Yom Echad Lo Emer. He said again, Hayom Yom Echad Lo Emer, Hayom Yom Echad Lo Emer. Then he said, Heint is ein Tagim Emer. My nefesh habamis versteht besser Yiddish. So he said it in Yiddish. We need English, I guess. So that was the way he put it, because Sfiras HaEmer is about the bitter of the nefesh habamis, and the word, the Hebrew wasn't getting to him. So he said, then my nefesh habamis understands Yiddish better. So that's a good level. Okay, it's a good beginning.
Excellent.
Yeah. Look, there's nothing wrong. Most person learn Gemara and you learn the logic of it. A lot of people learn, they enjoy it, like they enjoy mathematics. I ever told you a story? I was on a plane once. I was sitting 5-6 rows ahead of me. I see a guy and he pulls out a Gemara right when let's take off. He was learning, not the biggest, like a middle size. Yeah, I was impressed. Then comes the meal, and he eats the tray for meal. He takes it. So I was like, not that I was judging. I wasn't judging him. It was just intriguing. So I moved over after the meal. There was an empty seat near him.
What do you expect in a Saturday afternoon flight?
No. Anyway, I move over and I see he's without a yarmulke, which I couldn't see before. And he's learning Gemara. I was very intrigued. I just know it was more like, it was interesting. Who's this guy? He's an elderly guy. So I roll over near him there, and I'm sitting there. He's learning Masechta Brachas, and he's learning. I just said, "Hello, Shalom Aleichem." I've always had a question in Masechta Brachas. And I opened up to the daf where it says that if a person doesn't make Borcha B'Torah Tchila, and he doesn't make a bracha to Hashem, that Hashem gave the Torah, ultimately he's going to forsake the Torah. So the Gemara and brachas happened, but he was learning. He wasn't learning. He wasn't on that page. He was on a different page. So I said, "How do you explain this? You need to learn Torah all day and all night, and you don't remember there's a God." So he goes to the whole explanation. He explains it to me. He says, "What do you mean? If there's no God, then the whole Torah has no basis. The whole basis is because there's a God." Then suddenly he stops himself in the middle. He says, "You're a clever guy," because he's sitting there with Ariyanik and eating treif. You understand? So I didn't say anything. I didn't I was just like that. I just felt. But he was explaining to me. Even that he was explaining. Look, that's how it is. Okay.
He didn't say anything about his life after all.
No, look, he didn't. Honestly, I don't know what his story is. Who knows?
For sure,
Yeah, he was for sure.
Yeah,
We're talking. I was learning Gemara with
Korea. No, he could have been from Korea. That's the biggest selling.
He was not Korean, trust me. That I could tell you. He wasn't Korean. He was a real id, and I don't know. It doesn't. I'm not. He was going to share. I would share. He didn't share. I didn't push him. We'll start telling. It's not like.
Why did he give him mercy?
Not the whole idea.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the point. V'yod the lamata to show the guf and nefesh habamis b'chinas gili eid ein sof. V'hu aydei hizbonenus, and how does it show the guf and nefesh habamis? How do you show a grobe guf and nefesh habamis elokus gili eid ein sof? You do it through aydei hizbonenus b'yisavis yesh ma'ayin, through meditating, contemplating on the creation of yesh ma'ayin. How everything that exists, everything that was created, conceived, comes from a koyach eliki, a divine koyach that creates it, conceives it. Because there's nothing that makes itself. Nothing can create itself. And nothing lives on its own. The only way you can exist and live and continue to be sustained, is through the Koyach Eliki that conceives it and gives it life. So Mahava, Machai, the Lashon Mahava usually refers to conceiving something. Machai means keeping it alive. Shezeh Yocheli is Gam Ba'asogas HaNefesh HaBamis. Even the Nefesh HaBamis could understand this. Rak Shezeh B'chinus HaSogas HaMetzias Levad. Nefesh Habamis only understands the mitzias of it. It understands the concept that nothing can create itself. Nothing can keep itself alive. It needs some force to keep it. So the Nefesh Habamis can appreciate that idea, that mitzias. The Nefesh Habamis cannot see the mahus of the divine, with the ayin eliki, the divine energy, ayin, yesh mayin, the ayin within the yesh that creates it. The Elmolim nitner reshus layin liris, because had God given us permission for the eye to see, lo yoyroya sayeshkla, like he says in Shayach V'Emunah, he would not see any yesh. If we were able to see within our nefesh habam, within our gashmizdika world, the koyach eliki, there would be no yesh. We wouldn't see any yesh. The chenu beriyas hanashamas agvoyas lamato. This is how the high neshamas, the great neshamas, see things even down here. Shiriyosam it's neshama aruroyin es ha'ayin eliki. Here, the great neshamas even down here, they look at something, they see the ayin eliki. They don't see the yesh. It doesn't say they don't see the yesh. They see the ayin eliki within the yesh. Because one wonders, it says when the Alter Rebbe would look at a beam, it says he saw the koyach eliki in it. So the question is always asked, did he also see a beam? Or he only saw koyach eliki? You have to say he also saw a beam because it's also apitera. There is a beam. But it's interesting, what does it mean? It's hard to imagine.
No, the koach elokir has to give koach to something. So if it's just you see the koach elokir, so what?
Yeah, but you could say, remember, the something itself is also elokus. It's not just like the neshama and the guf. The guf itself is also a koach elokir. The Rebbe Rashab in Teira Shalom said by one Farbrengen, he was very inspired, and he says, if you bring me a plate, I'll show you the koach elokir in it. So they brought a plate, and then right before he said he changed his mind, and he said that because it'll be magashim. It'll be magashim. People will be magashim. It means they won't appreciate it. They'll whatever. So missed opportunity. Rak shemasig shadover hukach. She doesn't see the ayin aliki, the nefesh habamis. He only understands, appreciates that the dove, that's how it is. Sheisavusim ayin aliki. He understands that the hisavus had to come from some deeper energy. It's like we can understand that within this table there are subatomic particles, even if we don't see it. Obviously here it's stronger because it's creating it, shaping it. But also the energy within something shapes it. But tzarechli is bitla yesh la'ayin. So the nefesh habamis cannot see it and understand the mechus of it, but it can understand it, and also understand that there has to be a bitl for yesh la'ayin, because there's a conclusion. If the koyach eliki, the divine power, is giving it strength, then this object, the yesh, has to be bottled to the ayin. In other words, this is all the contemplation of the nefesh habamis, how the neshama is teaching the nefesh habamis to appreciate elikus. By two things, two stages. One is to understand that there's something inside that's giving you life, and number two is that your outer yesh has to be bottled to that thing, because that's your source.
So why don't we repeat these paragraphs every day to ourselves?
We should. I think a person, that's why we daven, that's why we visit bonus. This is exactly what we should be repeating. Look, Chassidim daven properly, this is tefillah. When you read tefillah, you talk all about how the kus gives life to existence, and the kolzeh hu b'chinas hasogas hametzias. All this is hasogas, understanding of the metzias of the thing. Omnam, however, yesh b'zeh yisun maila. Even though we're talking about it like almost like an inferior state to only understand the metzias, he's not going to talk that there's a strength to this even over riyas hamuhus. What is it? There's yes b'zeh yisun maila. This understanding the metzias of something has a great advantage. Even though this knowing and understanding of elikus is only metzias, like Nefesh Habamis knows, understands the existence, there must be something that's giving life to existence. Ach etzem hasogas hadavar. What? Even though that the idea of Sogan is a yidis mitzis. Ach etzem hasogas hadavar. Next page, Tofnun Ches. But the actual thing that you're understanding, shekachu harizeh b'chinas riyah mamish. So even though it's only hasogas hametzias, but the thing itself that you're understanding is in a level of actual seeing it. What does he mean? That it is misamis. How would you translate misamis? It's very resonates. It's very truth. You sense the truth of it very much. That a thing does not create itself. In other words, what he's saying is riyah, the power of riyah. Forget about riyah samahus now. We're not talking about neshama. We're talking about the guf and nefesh habamis. That when you really contemplate on the idea that nothing creates itself, it's not just belief. It's a very logical thing, and it's a very airtight statement. As such, it's nesamis. Nesamis riyah. When you see something, you don't have to necessarily understand its personality. You just see it. Seeing is believing. Seeing is like sensing it in a very truthful way. So there's the element of riyah that shmiya doesn't have. When you hear someone say something to you, you didn't see it yourself. You could say maybe he didn't see it right, blah blah. When you see it yourself, even if you don't understand it, there's no denying. There's no denying. So it's basically this element in the gufish nefesh habamis of riyah is you may not appreciate you may not see the ayin alaki, but the concept is as if you saw the idea is so truthful to you that's undeniable. That's what he's saying here. I know you could ask the question, why is it undeniable? A lot of people deny that. They say that things do create themselves, or nothing created this universe. But that's another story. Talking about if you're just your pure logic and there's no consequences. The idea is this building, for example, you don't know who built it, but there's no question that someone built it. You don't know the muhus of the architect. You don't know what he's like. You don't know whether it's a he or she, for that matter. But someone says to you, is this building put here by somebody? Absolutely, no doubt. As if you saw the person. You say, how do you know for sure? Because nothing creates itself. Simple. A book is written, there has to be an author. So you don't know the Mahus, but the emes of it is as if you saw it yourself. That's essentially what he's saying here. So the world testifies to the idea that there's someone created it, and there's no doubt about that. In the emes of it. Even though you're not seeing Mahus, you're seeing Mitzias, you only understand the Mitzias of it, but the truth of it is like you see it. That's what he's saying here. I mean, I just, not to confuse things, it's not the Re'iyah that he was talking before, that in the Shama sees the Mahus and Malachim, and, I'm sure he's going to get back to that. And this truth, that a thing didn't create itself, is Mesamas B'Yesel Lamata Dafka. Down here, it's even more resonating as a truth. B'Samtus Chushius, in a type of, how do you say B'Samtus Chushius? The tangible emes. Because on this earth we see how everything erodes, everything ages, and everything dies. So if you think about this physical world, in this physical world, it's even more truthful to say that something must be giving life to existence, because existence on its own has no power, has no value. We see everything erodes. In other words, l'mayli, you're not going to see that. So the Guf and Nefesh Abamis sees something that the Malachim don't even see. It sees the weakness of material existence, which must conclude that there must be something that's giving it life.
Why would you say that Malachim don't see it?
He didn't say that right here, but it looks like because we see it in a very good. Malachim don't see this world in the same way. They don't see a physicality, probably. Bottom line is, we see it in a very tangible way. We see people die, God forbid. We see everything erodes. We see a world that on its own has no real substance, no real truth to it. Hari behechech lema shehem havim. So since they, on their own, they're constantly eroding, and if sudden, every second, you have to say that there's something that's keeping them going. The chol dover hanifsed behechrech she'en kaima mitzadatzme, kein kiyuma mitzadatzme. Anything that is, the rule is that anything that's a dover hanifsed, anything that is eroding, anything that is weakening, can behechrech, you must say, does not have its own kiyum. The emitziusim atzme, and it doesn't have its own mitzius. Something else must be giving it life. The gamuven, another problem with that.
No, that's why it's probably so easy for people to be they deserve with the sun.
True, that's right. We look at things that have eternal, that seem unchangeable. The gamuven, another thing that's understood. The chol davar yesh, chol dvar yesh, u'mitzias, hari behechich shezavusehu b'derech ein arech. He's adding a new logical now statement. We said so far like this: that the Nefesh Abamis can understand that the yesh has an ayin that gives it energy. It understands, therefore, that it has to be bottled to that ayin. We now added that everything in this world on its own weakens and erodes and dies, and therefore that's machrier, that there has to be a kiyum from something outside of it. And now he's adding another thought, that the thing outside of it, or within it, that's giving it life, has to be shalei berachtet. It cannot be relative to it. It's in a completely different dimension. Why? Ki ef shaliyas yesh mi yesh im lo sheyi ayin. Okay. Because if it's coming from the same level, just a stronger thing. In other words, you can't say the sun, for example, is giving life to the eroding earth, because the sun is in the same substance. Today we know the sun also is made up of particles, and it's also eroding, scientifically speaking, and it's not going to live forever. So something that's a yesh can't give life to another yesh. It has to be something that's shlei berach, that's from a different dimension. In other words, one weak thing can't give life to another weak thing. You can't say, for example, a father gave birth to his son, and the father created the son. Yes, you gave the seed, but you were also a son of a father before. So there has to be something outside of, as we know, the sequence that makes it happen.
Are we able to say that in a subatomic particle level also?
Why not?
I don't know.
You mean to say what gives the energy to subatomic particles?
Yeah, matter into energy and energy into matter. We have how would one explain it?
Well, look, I'm not sure in physics. It's a good question. I have a different question since you bring it up. We know that the subatomic particles in everything, but the physical thing we see what is it? Is that also subatomic particles? You know what I'm saying? The outer layer is like it says, like Chassidus it says, the neshama does not create the body; it gives life to the body. Subatomic particles is the life force within everything, but it doesn't create the outer layer. Am I right if I said that, or it's wrong?
I'm not sure.
No,
Something
there's nothing else.
Something have to make it.
There's nothing else.
So this is just an illusion what we see? I mean,
it's a combination.
but you understand, in the Chassidus it says, for example, the guf is not created by the neshama. The guf has its own source that makes a body. The neshama is the conduit for how that energy comes. But that's why when the neshama leaves, Chassidus says the body remains. If the body was created by the neshama, as soon as the neshama leaves after death, the body should disappear. It takes time to decompose, but there is a physical thing. So Chassidus says the yesh hagashmi, like the leaf, and the energy inside the leaf are not the same. The energy inside the leaf gives the leaf its personality, but then there's another kayach seva kalam that gives the leaf its substance.
Yeah.
But I don't think in physics it's probably not like that. The outer is just an expression of the inner. Like in other words, water is H2O. There's nothing else.
Yeah.
But we do have an outer. I'm not sure. I mean, that's what something.
I don't know what to say in that scenario.
Okay, I don't know how it is in the. I don't know how because my question would be to on a physics level. Then why do we see water? Why don't we just see H2O?
Well,
Because we can't see. I understand we can't see molecules. So what we're seeing is. But what are we seeing? I mean, is there anything outside of the H2O? There has to be, because you could have H2O without water. You could have hydrogen, oxygen.
not in combination.
If you combine them, it automatically becomes water. Okay.
It's a compound.
It's a compound.
Different properties.
Because physics doesn't talk that way. It doesn't talk about the outer and the inner in that way. The inner is the outer. You're right. The inner is the outer. But Chassidus does talk that way. The energy does not make the thing. It just enlivens it. And then there's another.
When you get into quantum theory, you have that problem with particles versus energy and the wave, and how they and together is what forms things. And then you can't look at them both ways at the same time.
No, there is in science what glues together and makes a compound.
Right.
So there is another.
But
that's a different thing. Yeah. Anyway, so this is okay. I'm moving the chol davar. So there must be, if it's yesh me yesh, there has to be. There's no way yesh can become a yesh without an ayin, some jump.
Why that it can't reshape itself? Why?
No, because if it's a yesh, if the yesh of the world is weak and on its own, it has to, the energy that it's getting to keep it alive has to come from something that's completely in a different dimension. It says because of shalis, you can't have a yesh from a yesh without some ayin, without some jump, without some in between, like a vacuum or void.
Right.
So he says, one second, Hainu, shenesavu dover melei dover. In order to create something from nothing, from nothing. The kol zeh lamata b'chinsriya chushis mamish. All this we can actually see, not see, meaning see with the truth, because it makes total sense. It's totally resonating. U'kamoi kein b'chol inyan b'pchinas asogel l'kuz b'muchas shehin ma'advorim hatachtenim davke. And the same thing is everything that we understand of elikus in muchash, like a tangible way, from the things that we see below. So he's going to give example. From examples that we use, we could know very well. We could really appreciate and in depth know the nimshal, which is the example is an example for something. So in other words, when we look at this material world and we see it as an example for things of elikus, because we can actually see the physical things, so it's not just an abstract idea. We actually have physical things we can relate to that are a reflection of the metaphors for Elokus. So what he's saying is that we do have the advantage. Guf and Nefesh Abamis does have the advantage that it can actually touch and tangibly relate to things on this earth that allow it to extrapolate and understand how it is as a metaphor. How it is a metaphor.
Extrapolate, or it doesn't mean extrapolate. It just is Pasha. There's the Nefesh Bahamis. It sees it. It means.
But it's a moshel. It sees it as a moshel. Shema moshel yedim es hanimshel yesod yish moshel niro mirgus mubchinas liya mamish.
A muscle.
Yedua da moshel hu hanimshel.
Yeah.
The moshel is maybe it's more than extrapolate, right?
Sure.
The moshel is the nimshel.
This is what Dr. Raglan was saying the other day, that the world is Elokus, godliness. I mean, just express it.
In other words, when you example, it says that the water is a moshel for chesed, but it's more than a moshel. It is chesed as it manifests in this physical world. So when you look at water, we may consider it water, but you'll understand that water really is chesed metamorphosized into water. So then the water that refreshes, the water that cleanses, the water that runs down, is all really chesed, what chesed looks like in a gashmizdika form. Fire is gvura in a gashmizdika form. So we begin by seeing it as fire, and we don't see anything more. But what he's saying is that the mashal, that this world is really a so-called
It's always chesed. The water's not always chesed, obviously. What is that called? Tsunami? What is it?
Tsunami?
It's exactly an example of chesed.
Yeah, a big example of chesed without gvura.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Flood.
That's why it's not wrong.
That's why you need.
Rachamim always has to be
right. Chesed needs gvura to temper it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Too much love.
Okay, so the moshel is the nimshel. Valkain zeu dafka yedir b'muchash eichu mahu. And therefore, when you appreciate the moshel and you understand what it's a moshel for, you actually have a very tangible connection with Elokus. He's speaking now the advantage of the Nefesh Abamis can have.
Right, that's B'davka on the level of Nefesh Bahamis, it has that advantage.
Yes, because it relates to this physical world. If it applies itself in this way, obviously. V'zeu masha kosev u'b'sori echzeh lekah. This is what it says, that from my flesh I behold God.
This kind of answers the question.
The psari hu Nefesh Abamis.
Right, but this kind of question answers my question before about sorry libi, sorry ranu.
Okay, I understand. Yeah.
That's like we were seeing the real seeing. We talked like 2 pages ago.
Yeah. So bottom line is, so for my flesh, what is my flesh? That's an Nefesh Abamis. The kasher tizdachich lahakir es beira. That when the Nefesh Abamis is tizdachich, becomes refined, to recognize its creator, that created B'Savas Yesh Ma'ayim Kahai Gavna Kanal, understanding that existence had to be created by some ayin that's beyond us, like we mentioned. Eimrim al zeh echzeh lekah. So when a Nefesh Abamis appreciates and is refined enough to understand, recognize its creator, we don't just say it recognizes the creator. It says echzeh lekah. You grasp Elokus. Shu b'bchinas riyas hamuhus. The word echzeh also from chazon. We vision, a sight.
Yesterday, I was on the shelf.
So in other words, for my flesh, I don't just understand God. I see God.
I heard the statement one
One second. It doesn't say riyah. It doesn't say. It says erzeh because erzeh is the targum. Is the Aramaic. For riyah, the hainu rak hasoga chushes v'loy riyah chushes mamash. Because after all, we don't see it like the neshama sees it. It's not like mamash seeing it with your eyes, tangibly. It's understanding it tangibly.
Before we had a Sagas Mahus at the Hain Riyas Mahus. That was by Nefesh Elokis.
Right.
And now we have that it's not.
But he goes. He explains.
This is higher. This is the ultimate.
This is higher on one end, but it's
higher.
It's well in a certain way. One second. Because the Nefesh Abamis doesn't see the Mahus of Elokus. As we said before, we don't see the ayin. We cannot see the divine energy. It's only because it is so real in our minds, it's so truthful, that we see the nimshal in the moshel. Because it's so real in our in our contemplation, so it's as if we actually have we actually have a tangible understanding of it.
Yeah.
That's dake. I once heard this statement from somebody who seemed reliable that the Nefesh Bahamis, you see this Mashitas, it's just so involved in other things that it can't pay attention to the Gagus, so to speak. That the dake is just that the body is kafir brings the Nefesh Bahamis to a darker where you just can see these things. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I mean, I was looking for comment on that.
I agree. I mean, you're talking about the refinement.
In other words, the Nefesh Bahamis shouldn't have a problem seeing godliness. The fact that we're involved in other things, we have other interests, that in itself, it stops us from saying that.
But the Nefesh Bahamis, by its mechus, is only interested in self-interest, in survival. Because it's interested in eating and sleeping and taking care of itself. That's the problem. It's not. That's the personality of the Nefesh Bahamis. But the Nefesh Bahamis also can appreciate things by looking at something. Like, in other words, Hashgacha Pratis and Nefesh Bahamis could understand. It may not gravitate there on its own. That's why you need the neshama to educate it. The whole point is we're saying the neshama comes down to this earth to teach the Nefesh Bahamis things. Yeah. Here he's explaining how the Nefesh Bahamis can appreciate it even on its own terms, in a very tangible way. That's what he's dissecting here.
Okay, so
it's quite powerful stuff here.
Okay,
it's like really a formula.
Tizdakek means?
Tizdakek means to be refined. Lahakir means to recognize.
That I understand.
As boira. Okay.
You're saying the guf and the nefesh bahamis, you're sort of using them synonymously.
He uses them together. Yeah. I mean, guf nefesh bahamis meaning the material, our material. Guf physically is body. Nefesh bahamis is the spirit of the body. But basically the material.
But they're from a higher source than both.
They are, but he's not talking about that now.
I know.
He's talking really how the neshama explains Elokus to us on our terms here. Aval ein zasoga b'chin sidiyas hametzias levad ki masoga chushi mamish ki ilu rei be'enov.
So you show that you have to serve this from Shines in his own terms, for his own self-interest.
But it's not but you can't just say it's just knowing that it's there, but it's hasog chushis because it's as if you see it with your eyes. So you don't see the alakus, but because the moshel is the nimshel, you can see it almost like you can see what you're seeing is the water or the table, but because you appreciate that it cannot be on its own because it makes sense, so it's as if you see it, but you're not seeing actually the divine. That's the difference. You cannot say you're seeing Elokus, but you're definitely seeing something the truth of it is as if you're seeing something very, very concrete. Kilamata shadoy have seders kol advarim kanal, because below, when we see how everything in this world erodes, as we mentioned, hine hasogim misamesetzle ki ilu roi be'enav mamish. And when you keep thinking about it, you start saying, look, I look around in this world. I see everything dies, everything erodes, everything ages, everything withers. Whether it's money, whether it's food, whether it's covet, whether it's the body, whether it's the physical objects in this world. Nothing stays. The more you reflect on that, the more it really resonates, and it becomes like a real truth in your heart and soul and mind. As if you see it with your eyes, that this world doesn't have real life, doesn't have truth to it. In other words, for someone to say, this world is a shekadika world, it doesn't need faith. You don't need faith. Think about it. Contemplate on the world, and you see it's a world that's false. I don't just mean false of corruption. False in the sense that nothing in this world has real, eternal power. Everything dies. Everything erodes. So we know when something erodes, it means even in the beginning it's eroding. It's not just nothing has any eternal value. Now this is true, there's no question about it. Look at the pharaohs. Even the pharaohs, in their own distorted way, when they died, they had their brides buried with them, and they built these shrines because they thought they're going to live on eternally. Everyone knew the material world doesn't have permanence. So it's not something when you really think about it, it's become something as if you see it. Now, do you see the godliness that's giving it life? No. But you see from the weakness of it, you see that it can't have substance of its own. There's something missing. It's as if like when Einstein predicted the black hole and they finally proved it. No one ever saw a black hole. No one ever saw that star, because that's the whole point. That gravitational pull is so intense that it doesn't even let light escape. But there's no question there's something there, because you see the effect it has on everything around it. So that it's as if you see it. Okay. We'll just finish this chapter.
Sure.
Okay. So here we go. And this is the meaning that from my flesh I behold God. And Nefesh Habamis kashem is dachich. Nefesh Habamis, when it's refined, yesh bo hasoga lekis ki ilu roya. When a Nefesh Habamis gets refined, it has hasoga, an understanding in the godliness as if it's seeing it. It's not seeing it. That's why it doesn't say riyah. It says echza, but it's as if it's seeing it. By dezeh, by neshama. How do you read this? By dezeh, by neshama, hu b'chinas riyah samachus mamash, mitzad mahus neshama atzma shelakus. By dezeh. Okay, I don't know exactly how to translate it, but he's saying, and through this, the neshama has riyah samachus mamash. Because the neshama is mahus, and neshama atzma elakus. And neshama, because it's mahus itself is elakus, it has, what's the al yidei zeh? I don't get it.
This is a classic riyah that is given to the Nefesh
But what's the Nefesh Elokis is getting something from the Nefesh Habamis?
because of
Okay, fine. The Nefesh Habamis appreciate. Okay, I guess so. It goes like this. What he's saying, he's adding an element here. I thought it was the other way around. First, we started that the Neshama teaches the Nefesh Habamis all of this. Now he's saying when the Nefesh Habamis sees it, almost like seeing it, it gives something back to the Neshama, and the Neshama turns it into actually seeing Mamash the Muhus.
What does he give to the Neshama?
It says that Ayi Dezeh. He's just saying the word Ayi Dezeh. Ayi Dezeh, ba Neshama b'chinas riyah. How do you interpret it?
See, we know
in other words, bottom line is like this: when you are, let's say, contemplating on the weakness of this world, the erosion of the world, you come to the conclusion there must be something giving it life. That something is elikus. You can't see it physically, but you almost see it because through process of elimination, so to speak. So, what's happening with your neshama meanwhile? So your neshama is actually seeing the elikus. That's what he's saying here.
And eventually, the roof is going to nurture the neshama. We know that.
Okay,
is that what he's referring to?
I don't know. He doesn't say that here right now. He just says that neshama sees riyah samahus mamash because the neshama is elikus. That's what he's saying. Let's continue. Probably v'zeu masha kosav ata hareis ladas. This is what the pasuk says. Ata hareis ladas. This galus and neshama lamatu rak laharis le'inei basar hagufmi. What's ata hareis ladas? This galus and neshama lamata. The reason neshama is revealed down here below is only to show rak laharis le'inei basar hagufmi ech she Hashem hu Elokim. So he's referring Ata Hareis Ladas, you the neshama was sent down below only for one reason, to show the fleshy eyes of the body how Hashem is Elokim. V'gam Ladas hu Loshen Shvira. The word Ladas also means Shvira, to break. U'kamei v'yodeya behem es anshe sukkes. V'yodeya behem es anshe sukkes? Is that meaning of Shvira? So Ata Reis Ladas, one meaning is that to know, to make the Kuf and Nefesh Habamis know Elikus. One second. Okay, and the second interpretation of Ladas is to break the chumrius, the coarseness of the Nefesh Habamis. The kasher etzle misamis inis hasavis hayesh ma'ayin v'achdus Hashem. Because when the body and the Nefesh Habamis by them appreciates misamis, senses the truth of the savas that yesh was created by the ayin, and now senses the truth of divine unity. V'chein kol inyon elikim b'chinas riyah chushis. and when it appreciates and senses all the godliness with its physical eyes for the nefesh habamis, how do you mizbatel be'etzem mahusay? That causes the nefesh habamis to be broken, to be mizbatel from what its mahus is. U'kamay ha'oguz, like a nut, kishashevim ha'klipim is gala pri, like when you break its shell, it reveals the fruit inside. Kamay ken al yidei shviras ha'nefesh habamis mizgala ha'pri hu ha'nefesh halakis. Same thing. That when you break the nefesh habamis, the fruit gets revealed. And what is the fruit? That's the nefesh halakis b'b'chinas riyas ha'mahush mamash. That's the al yidei zeh. I got it. The neshama comes down. Its mission is atares ladas, is to reveal and teach the nefesh habamis elikus on its terms, and it does so through this hisbanus that yesh is weak, and the yesh needs an ayin, the ayin is shlei berach, all that. Nothing creates itself. Fine. The nefesh habamis appreciates that, almost as if it sees elikus. As a result, it breaks the resistance that the nefesh habamis wants to just do what it wants, and then the neshama gets freed. Because remember, the neshama is trapped in nefesh habamis too, and the neshama, the fruit, is free because you broke the klippa. That's what comes back to the neshama. That's how he's explaining it here. So the neshama, no, the neshama goes down to the body. If it doesn't do anything, the body's needs are going to overwhelm the neshama. I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to do this, I need to gossip, I need this, So the neshama, in a creative way, has to find a way to get convinced of nefesh habamis. Listen, my friend, you got to start this whole contemplation. In return, as it contemplates godliness, the nefesh habamis gets weakened and broken, and then the neshama can be released to appreciate elikus riyas mahus mamash. That's how he's interpreting it here. It's very interesting.
Someone's like in exile.
Yeah, in exile, and it's trying to get out of prison, but it has the problem. It has a partner that doesn't want to go.
Wow.
So it has to do some convincing here.
And that helps it.
And then once the nefesh habamis doesn't want to go, the neshama has big problems because it can't move on its own on this earth. That's it. Wow. Interesting chapter. Okay, so then that's what happens. Because the nefesh habamis, even though the idea, the concept is true by it, as if it sees it with its own eyes, because it's seeing the weakness of the world, it's seeing that the world can't really be it. It's still, at the end of the day, still a contemplation. It's in the mind. Yes, it's a tangible hasogin, something that's divine. You cannot say the nefesh habamis is seeing mamish elikus, the essence of elikus. So that's only the neshama has. But when the breaking of the nut is broken, the shell is broken, that allows the neshama on this earth, this earth, to see mamish mahus alakus, which a body in nefesh habamis cannot see to that extent. So it's like it's a partnership here. Omnom gam b'neshama yi there's a yisrin gadol. Nevertheless, the neshama is going to get something great out of this, a great virtue. L'gabe k'may shahoyse b'gan Eden, greater than it was in Gan Eden. Shahoye bo gam kin riyas hamuhus. There too it saw the muhus. But there it only saw a reflection of it. The Gam Gimel Rishenis, even though we said Gan Eden is the first Gimel Rishenis, Chachma Bina Das, and the worlds are Zayin Tachtoinus, but Gimel Rishenis Einem B'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof. That's also not Atzmus.
The Neshama is the Atzmus first. Wow.
Gan Eden is not Atzmus. Now he's going the other way around.
Maybe to ask the Neshamas if they want to be created.
Now that's in the root. But that's beyond this whole. But now he's going back. The Gan Eden itself is also not a Elikus. It's only a reflection, not Atzmus. Here's the advantage that comes to the neshama. What you were saying, that through the neshama coming down lamata, shepoyelas laharis hanefesh habamis, that it affects and causes the nefesh habamis to see and recognize lahakedes beira, to recognize the Creator. Aydezeh b'neshama hu b'chinas riyas hamuhus b'chinas muhusei v'atzmusei ein sof. This causes the neshama to have a vision, a sight, to be able to actually see Muhusi Vatzmuse, not just a reflection. Right? Primis Chachmas Tema, to see the primis of Chachmas Tema, Shazel Primis Atik, primis of Atik. And V'hu Shapela Nasa Aleph. And this is the meaning that the Pella becomes Aleph. The B'chinis Limud. That the Pella becomes Aleph in a level of teaching. Avaloi B'chinis Limud Ta'asoga. So not just in a form of learning in the mind. Kim B'chinis Riyas HaMuchus. Also in actually seeing the essence of it. V'zeh Shali Mesa Mashiach. That's why it says when Mashiach, and this is what it means, that when you Mesa Mashiach, Lo Yilam De Isha Sre'ehu. One person will not teach his friend. Because teaching another is only capable when you're talking about the mitzias of something. When you see the essence of something, you can't teach that. Either you know it or you don't. And that will be the limit of Mashiach, that you'll be able to learn, that you'll be able to see the muhus hadover.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
This is heavy duty.
These 3 chapters should be called The Way Back.
Wow.
Powerful.
Man, this is like a journey. This, with Chachmas Tema, now we're here. We're flying all over the place. We gotta, what's the connection to Chachmas Tema? Oh,
Last period.
it's a real problem. Pella Nasa Aleph. Let me see this. Pella.
Keeps going on.
It's very interesting that the Neshama comes to teach the Rav Shabbat or something.
Yeah, stuck down there. He couldn't go up to it. He couldn't see Kesser from the advantage of an hour.
You have to say that it's seen deeper than even its short shorsha.
See it down here. That's the thing. To see it down here.
Sure, but it has to be really
Okay.
meaningful.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's
that's an improvement because he came down there. On a personal level, the Nefesh Kus has to be improved by coming down here.
yeah. It makes that
Okay.
deeper connection.
We'll stop here, right?
Whose chiddush was it there? There is opinions in.
Should we read the Kitzur?
Yeah. Well, you want to do it tomorrow?
What do you want?
Some whatever.
The Kitzur tomorrow. So you're so quiet today.
And it's been even a couple of weeks. He's
It's
readjusted.
a Neshama.
It's trying to expand.
No? You getting anywhere?
So,
Okay.
We'll see you tomorrow.
so.
We're gonna have a share Tuesday.
Have a good day.
So
From my point of view, why not?
Yeah, you would.
Tisha B'Av is a good time to look at this.
If you're serious, we're coming.
Huh?
7 o'clock in the morning.
I'm fine. I'll be up anyway. It doesn't matter. You want to come?
Okay, sure, Tuesday.
Never did that before. Yeah, you're allowed to learn this stuff on Tuesday. There was a shout
So
about.
this is allowed.
There was a shout about learning time.
Can we have a head for have something to drink?
That I can't give you a head.
Put it by then in the ship over here. Or you just go.
Right.
It'll be a good party. It'll be a good party.
All right, so we're learning.
Who's
But
over there?
whose chiddush is it that is Primus in the?
So we conclude here. Let's take the Perek Reish Chavav. What? I'm
Whose
sorry.
chiddush? Whose chiddush is it that is Primus in